Welcome to the first installment of ARC News with Nate Williams. I'm the director of the Apologetics Resource Center. And I think in these types of episodes or videos, what we're going to do is we're going to cover culture and faith. We're going to cover some of the news related to those issues, but we're going to do so through an apologetics lens, defending the faith, proclaiming the faith. But before we do so, I want to explain something real quick. Apologetics is about defending the faith, answering questions, but we are to do so not in a defensive way. We don't have to have these knee jerk reactions. If you see something coming out in culture, a headline, a study, a story, and it seems to oppose the Christian faith and Christian values, we don't have to get all bothered by that and angry and upset and have these reactions of, well, I guess it's not true. Throw it all away. Don't look at it. No, if what we believe is true, good, and beautiful, we can interact with what's happening politically, culturally, what's happening over in the academic world. And so as we go through the news and I pick stories here and there and we walk through things apologetically, just keep that in mind. You're going to come across headlines that might make you upset. But instead of just throwing away the story, throwing away the article, see what you can learn, work through the issues, think critically about what you're reading or what you're watching. And that's what we're going to try to do with these types of episodes, these types of videos. ARC News, again, Nate Williams. We'll walk through these things, and I hope to practice this with you. And as always, I'd love to know your thoughts. So you can reach out to me, social media, or through the comment section on whatever platform you're using at the moment. That's what we're trying to do. But first up, we are going to talk about a miracle. And when I say that, miracle, it's a Forrest Frank, a famous Christian singer. He had a broken back, and apparently there was rapid healing, and something that should have taken months to heal from just took, I guess, a couple weeks. And so people are proclaiming it as a miracle. Now, whether or not you know Forrest Frank, he's become super popular recently. How should we as Christians respond to miracle stories? My advice is cautious optimism. Some people like to go one of two ways. If you are very cynical, you will think, well, I don't want to believe it because I don't want it to come out to be wrong. I don't want to get caught in a lie or believing something fake or false. I'm not going to believe any of it. Some of you will go the other route and you'll say, well, God works miracles. I believe it on the spot. I don't need to hear anything else. It's just true. When I hear a miracle, I get excited. The path I try to take with something like this is cautious optimism. I believe in a God who is active. I believe in a risen Savior, a God who is moving, a God who does miracles. And we see that all throughout the New Testament, the Bible as a whole, but specifically, you'll see that in the book of Acts as the church grows and expands. So if we believe that our God is good, he's a good father, he loves us, he takes care of us, well, we also believe that he'll do miracles, and we are to ask and pray for miracles, and are to have this expectation of faith, not that God always says yes, but that he wants what's best for us. He has a plan for our lives, his will is good, and he provides. And so sometimes that involves these incredible miracles. Other times it's just providing through ordinary means, or in the Lord's Prayer, our daily bread. So going to the story, Forrest Frank, this is from the Christian Post. Forrest Frank showed evidence of his back injury and rapid healing in a recent TikTok following a skateboarding accident caught on video. It was like a ring video in which he suffered fractures of the L3 and L4 vertebrae in his back. Here's my back, the 30-year-old Your Way's Better singer said in a Wednesday TikTok video, holding up a video x-ray of his fractures. Look at these two right here, he continued, pointing to the video. They're smooth, right? Nice and smooth. You go to L3, and it appears there that it is a pretty significant crack or fracture. So I'm going to go back and forth a little bit, maybe make sure y'all can see that. Am I just making that up? That looks clean. That looks fractured. Did we see a miracle? Was it just insane, rapid recovery? Under the video, in a top-like comment, a fan commented, I sent this video to my dad, who has been a neurosurgeon for 30 years, with no other context but to read the scans. He said you had two transverse fractures, broken back, and the minimum time to heal is 3 months. So, yeah, it was God's work. And so, again, as Christians, when we come across stories like this, what do we think? I encourage cautious optimism. I believe God's moving, but we don't want to be duped. We don't want to be tricked. And so, as with any claim, where is the evidence? And it looks like there's evidence of the fractures through X-ray scans, X-ray of his fractures. That's what's shown. And so, again, I believe in a God that does miracles today. He's alive, he's active, and he loves us. So that would be my advice there. Forrest Frank, that story came out a day ago from the Christian Post. Moving to a very different topic, there's an article that caught my eye from the Free Press. Why I changed my mind about the death penalty. And people will go back and forth on this. Death penalty, is it biblical? Is it just? What do we think of it? Is there a change between the Old Testament and the New Testament? What about Jesus, the Sermon on the Mount? What about grace and mercy and forgiveness? How do we balance these things? And I thought this article by Charles Lane, again, the Free Press, uh, what he said was very interesting. I used to oppose the death penalty. Then I took a closer look and realized that though it is imperfect, it's also necessary. We know God instituted the death penalty in Genesis. So for those who say the death penalty, it's unbiblical, it's unchristian, God wouldn't like it, it's not just, that's just not correct. The death penalty was instituted by God as a measure of justice, a life for a life. And now we have a president, Joe Biden, wasn't very pro death penalty. President Donald Trump has reversed Biden's policy, and the Justice Department is seeking the death penalty, I believe, for Luigi Mangione, the alleged killer of health insurance executive Brian Thompson. And the Justice Department is also expected to bring federal hate crime charges this week against Elias Rodriguez for allegedly gunning down two young Israeli embassy staffers in Washington, and so on and so forth. So Donald Trump is more supportive of the death penalty than Joe Biden was. So different things to work through here. I like what Neil Shenvi said on Twitter. He said a couple things, and I think there's a good balance. As Christians, I believe the death penalty is biblical, instituted by God in strong, extreme circumstances. But what Shenvi noted, and I think this is good to do, we can also be wary of government implementation. So I want us to hold these two separate things. At its core, at its principle, the death penalty is biblical. However, we can be suspicious and wary of government implementation. That governments run by humans like you and me, and we're imperfect. So we want to take incredible care that you don't execute an innocent person. And so Charles Lane walks through a few examples, and what he says is this: the case of executing innocent people, the support for that in modern times, there's been some reforms. In modern times, the case is overstated and it's exaggerated because of all the different steps you can take, appeals, different resources. The odds of us executing an innocent person in today's world, I'm not talking 100, 150, 200 years ago. I'm talking in today's world is very minuscule. It's very unlikely. And what he says, I think ultimately what he concludes, I'll agree with. The death penalty exists for a certain reason. And this is what he says. My support for the death penalty is based on its unique capacity to deliver condign retribution for extremely evil acts. The death penalty is a unique and very strong measure. It is not to be handed out like candy, willy-nilly for everyone. Oh, you stole something. Oh, you said something bad. No, but it is a unique and strong punishment that can be applied to unique, grave, and evil situations, such as terrorism. Life in prison is does not fit the bill when it comes to justice for strong terroristic acts. For let's take serial killers. I might also put in serial, I just got to be careful for the algorithm and all that, saying certain words, but essay serial people who engage in those behaviors. It is a unique punishment that needs to be applied, in my opinion, sparingly, only when the evidence is overwhelming, only when the evidence just basically beyond any doubt the person did the crime. And I think it can be and should be applied in those situations. And we can argue some of the gray areas within that. But again, it is biblical, it is consistent. And one of the main arguments that I don't know if I agree with from the other side is this, that the life in prison, there we go, forgot that for a moment. Life in prison is the alternative. I'm not convinced that it's any more humane than the death penalty. I'm not convinced that life in prison, which is its own death sentence, let's be clear. If you put someone in prison for life, that is a death sentence. They're not getting out. And besides, the way we work it now, even if you're on death row, you can stay there for decades. And so it becomes its own life in prison type of sentence. But I'm not convinced that life in prison is any more humane. So if you want to check out the article, it's on the Free Press, Why I Changed My Mind About the Death Penalty by Charles Lane. I think that it makes some good arguments. And let me find a couple paragraphs to read, just like I did for the Christian Post. Um, regarding the answer of executing an innocent person, this is what he says. My thinking evolved over the course of my journalism career, including several years covering capital litigation at the Supreme Court. I found the system undeniably imperfect, but less broken and impervious to reform than the critics argued. In 2010, I published a short book, Stay of Execution, explaining my thinking. Categorical opposition to the death penalty on religious or other moral principles is a stance I respect. Even when I was against capital punishment, however, that was not my rationale. I always felt, for instance, that death could be imposed for certain extremely heinous and socially destabilizing crimes. If the Allies had captured Hitler after World War II, they would have been on solid moral and legal ground to execute him for war crimes, just as they did for other high ranking Nazis tried at Nuremberg. I felt the same about the others of major terrorist acts in my lifetime. Timothy McVeigh, who carried out the 1995 Oklahoma City bombing, the perpetrators of the September 11th, 2001 attacks, and John Allen Muhammad, who masterminded the Washington, D.C. sniper attacks that killed 10 in 2002. What used to give me pause was my belief, held by most death penalty opponents, that there were inadequate safeguards against the execution of an innocent person. Indeed, I thought the risk would always be non zero, and that was too high, even if it meant no death penalty for the worst of the worst. Then I started reporting on claims of actual innocence, as the anti death penalty movement referred to cases of allegedly wrongly convicted people on death row. To my surprise, many of them did not pan out. The first such case I covered was that of John Bird, an Ohio man whose insistent claim that he didn't stab a convenience store clerk to death in 1983 convinced a bitterly divided federal appeals court to grant him a stay of execution. A fresh hearing was ordered to examine new evidence that Bird claimed would prove his innocence. But his story fell apart at the hearing. It turned out that his sister had coached an alibi witness and performed favors for him. Bird was executed in 2003. Virginian's execution of Roger Coleman in 1992 for the 1981 murder of his 19-year-old sister-in-law, Wanda McCoy. Basically, same thing. They went through the evidence and they proved that he committed the crime. Then in 2009, I'm skipping through some of these things. You're welcome to read for yourself. In 2009, lawyers for convicted cop killer Troy Davis of Georgia persuaded the Supreme Court to grant him a new hearing after a worldwide protest. But then basically a judge published a 174-page opinion in which he called Davis's argument largely smoke and mirrors, etc., etc. You look at through some of these cases, and just about most of the time or all of the time, the courts clearly get it right, and the death penalty goes through, so on and so forth. So it happened, but that while in the past there were people killed wrongly, but more and more there are safeguards, even though they're slow moving, and it doesn't happen that often, if at all, in modern days. So again, death penalty, it's biblical, it's just, but also we want to be wary. We want safeguards against executing innocent people, and we want to be wary of a government full of humans who are imperfect. So again, great article there by Charles Lane. Moving to the final story for today, the Keller Center, this is part of the Gospel Coalition, came out with this article titled, "Are You Ready for the AI Apocalypse?" And I encourage pastors, church leaders, churches, theologians, we need to be thinking through these things biblically with the gospel in mind, the incarnation of Jesus in mind, Genesis in mind, why humans were created. How do we handle AI? At some point soon, I'm going to put out a conversation I had with Dr. Joshua Ferris on these topics where we talk about these things. But basically, this AI shows us who we think we are. So, what do we do with AI? Is it going to lead to our apocalypse? Will it lead to the downfall of humanity? Well, maybe, maybe not. But it does expose where we find our value, where we find our worth. So, if you find your value in work and in production, AI is going to bring you a world of hurt because AI, it's smarter, it's faster, it's more intelligent, it can problem solve faster. When you combine that with robotic technology and you put this AI in robots, well, guess what? Robots are faster, stronger, quicker, they can do more. So I would encourage us, if that's where you find your worth and your value, you're going to be less human and less valuable because ultimately robots can do this better, and that will happen very soon. So let's not find our value there. And then, secondly, AI shows us what we think work is for. The author of this article is Chris Watkin. AI shows us what we think work is for. And, well, I'll read a paragraph. AI is forcing us to ask fundamental questions about the meaning and purpose of work. I feel this every day in my job as a university lecturer. If AI can write an essay better than the students can, what do I think I'm teaching them and why? What's the point of a college degree? What's the point of education? As one recent article asks, if the machine is as good as me, then what use am I? And then skipping down, AI wonderfully reduces the friction of work, the grunt, the slow bits, the obstacles, but it also reveals to us how gravely we misunderstand this friction. We most often see friction as a nuisance, something to be optimized away in favor of greater productivity, and then going down. But what I encourage us and what the author encourages us is this moving down. Friction is a gym for the soul. That awkward conversation, the blank page, the child who won't sleep when we have a report to write, these aren't roadblocks to our growth. They're the highway to wisdom and maturity, to being the sort of people who can deal with friction in life with resilience and grace. Without it, we remain weak and small, however impressive our productivity. Going down, and I love him bringing in Gideon here. Gideon whittled down his troops to 300 at God's command. Why is that? The reason is this: ultimately, to God be the glory for what we do and what we produce. God intentionally introduces friction by reducing the army to reshape the character of his people, making them the sort of people who rely on God, not on themselves. So if you're like, I need to get rid of all inefficiency, I need to get rid of all friction, everything has to be smooth, I have to produce at a high level, always, always, always. Where is God in that? Where is the moral formation and the shaping? It's not just about the victory, it's about our worshiping and glorifying God throughout the process, not just the result. And then point three, AI showcases God's glory. For Christians, AI reveals reality to us in an even deeper way. Its disembodied brilliance, its ability to churn out content, code, and even sound advice uncovers what's most glorious about the gospel. Uh, at the heart of the Bible's message, we don't find a series of pieces of good advice or even a list of answers to our deepest questions. AI shows us that this isn't even what we're searching for anyway. What do you think is the top use of AI in 2025? According to a Harvard Business Review report, it's therapy and companionship. At our deepest level, we don't want to know something. We want to be known by someone. We don't want information. We want intimacy. I think that is a beautiful finish to our point and really our episode and our video for today. AI exposes us. We want more than knowledge. Yes, knowledge is great. How do I do this? Or what's the answer to that question? But we want to be known. And this is where the gospel comes in. AI can never replace God, his presence, the need for companionship that only can be supplied through Jesus Christ. And going back to the Garden of Eden, walking with God, talking with God. So reading the word and prayer. Jesus, through the incarnation, became human to live amongst us. Emmanuel, God with us. AI is a disembodied brain of sorts, as a disembodied intelligence, can never match that. And we see that relational love through the church, through the gathering and the meeting of the local church. Hugs, handshakes, laughter, the ugliness and the beauty that comes with all that, with humans meeting together. We see the glory of the gospel and the beauty of creation through these things, the communion, baptism, singing. It's beautiful. And AI points us to that, the need for that. AI can't replace it, but says, let's go deeper. We need that intimacy to be known, to have that companionship and that community. And AI, again, can only go so far. We need the gospel. We need Jesus. All right, y'all, this was the end of the first installment of ARC News, looking at what's happening in culture through an apologetics lens, having these types of conversations. Nate Williams with you. I'm going to try to do this every week or so. Might not have perfect, attendance, so to speak. I might miss a week here and there, but this is to help us think through things apologetically, biblically, theologically, for the glory of God. Until next time, I'll talk with you later.